Welcome back to story time, where we just chill and read bedtime stories. Hold on, let me blow my nose before I start. It's not actually that bad tonight, so. I try to get anything that's in there out before I start. But yeah, tonight we're going to be, I believe, finishing our book that we started, Julie of the Wolves. We've done 4. This will be the 4th read along, so it took us 4 days of reading to finish this. It's really not that big a book, but I think one of the days I only read it for like an hour or so. Butterfly says, I'm new here. Can I have a free book? Honestly, go search the shelves and go pick one. I let people borrow my books all the time. I do like to get most of them back so that I can lend them out again. I'm like a little library over here. But yeah, I do like to lend people books. I do like to get, like I said, I do like to get them back just so that I can lend them to other people. I can't keep lending them if people don't bring them back. So yeah, it's hurting now. I put an ice pack on it. It's definitely hurting it again. Actually, I'm gonna go grab another. I can't take the prednisone. Sorry, I can't take the what's it called at night? The steroids, and they're wearing off. I took them this morning and they're wearing off, but I can't take them at night. Plus, they only gave me like 5, so I only have like enough to take 1 a day, so I can't take them anymore anyway. But I think I just have some Tylenol and ibuprofen here. They said to do like a mix, and it could help. Let's see. Do I have my? Here. I'll do this. Oh, because yes, I am definitely starting to hurt again. Love my pajamas. Thank you. Yeah, this is my doggy pajamas. There's a corgi. There's a husky. There's like a little hound. There's Piper, the hound. I only have the tops on, so all the dogs are upside down, some of them. There's a little hound. That can be Piper. I think there's like a little Chihuahua type dog or something over here. Or a wiener dog over here. Can't see its face because it got cut off at the bowl. Oh, there's a little Chihuahua. A little Chihuahua. Yeah, lots of little doggies on there. I see all the breeds. Very cute. Yeah, I like my pajamas. They're very cute pajamas. Oh. And then I have the Dalmatian ones, but those are dirty. When I was in so much pain the other night, I literally got a pain fever. My bed was, I woke up soaked. I was in so much pain. I don't get fevers for no reason like that. Like there was no other reason to have a fever, so that's what I'm assuming is that it was a pain fever. Oh, all right. You do 2 Tylenol and 4 Motrin. I can take that like up to twice a day, and I haven't taken any of it today because. Oh, I didn't know that. He said Josh from the first live has a funny channel. Not to change the subject. Oh, if he's funny, I'll go subscribe to him. I didn't know he had a channel. Oh, you know what? He mentioned something that he had something on his channel, but I didn't know if he was just like posting random stuff or if he actually had like a nice channel that he's working on. I can't even lift the medicine to my mouth with that hand. Nice. Yeah, I like to see our subscribers grow their channels too. Yeah, I'll have to go sub after that. Thank you for telling me. Got my Clearly Canadians back. Yay! They were sold out of them in the store. Yeah, it's like the Amazing something Joshua, so I'll find it. Thank you. Thank you, Colette. That's very nice of you. Okay. So let's get our bookie book. Oh, actually, I did get eye drops too. Let's do the eye drops if I can, if I find them. Where did I put them? Let me see if I have my eye drops here as well. In my medicine bag, hopefully. My eye drops in here. Just because my eyes are all dry and I don't have to squint and scrunch my eyes a million times. Oh, I think I found it. No, that's not it. That's one of the old ones. Where are the new eye drops that I just got? Where's the new eye drops? I literally just bought a new thing of eye drops like yesterday. Should be underneath all the other medicine here. Out. Yep, okay, they're under there. Under the other bottles. I'm gonna put some eye drops in because the light especially like really bothers my eyes. When did you find out about the horse country? Wait, sir, you was never subbed to me? Like and subscribe, everyone. Country said I don't sub to many channels, but I subbed to Butterfly today. Yeah, you were never subbed to Butterfly? You better be subbed to me. Better be subbed to me, Country. Winchester says, sub to daddy, sorry. Winchester says, daddy, sub to Ari so that she can read me my stories. Winchester says, you better sub so Ari can read the stories to me every night. All right, we're gonna start. I sub to you all, thank you. All right, if you haven't, like and subscribe, please, thank you. So we're gonna get back into our little book, Julie of the Wolves. We are on like the last 40 pages or so. So we should get it finished tonight. Where we left off, poor Jello had just passed away. Jello got like kicked out of the pack for basically the rest of the pack had accepted Julie Mayax. The rest of the pack accepted her and they were basically treating her like one of their pups. So like she's like an adult pup to them, to the wolves, because she acts like she was kind of taking advice from the younger puppies about how to act to gain the acceptance of the alpha wolf. So the alpha wolf and the alpha female kind of accepted her as one of their pups, and because Jello wasn't accepting her and was treating her pretty nasty, Jello ended up getting himself killed by the rest of the wolves attacked him. After Jello stole her meat, Jello like raided her little backpack and her little frost pantry that she made. She like dug into the permafrost to bury her stuff to make like a little freezer for her meat. And Jello raided it and stole a bunch of her food, and he stole her backpack, and then the other wolves turned on him and did away with him. So kind of sad that poor little Jello is no longer with us. So we're gonna look again to see where I was. We're almost done. Yeah, here, we'll just kind of pick up there, I guess. So I'll pick up on that last page. Jello had been so cowed he was useless, and now he was dead. Slowly she opened her pack. The food was gone, but her needles, ulo, and boots were tucked in the pockets where she had put them. They were now more wonderful to Mayax than airplanes, ocean liners, and great wide bridges. As she put on her shoes, she checked for her man's knife and matches. They were there too. Life was hers again. Slinging her pack to her shoulders, she placed a stone at Jello's head and turned away. You've got to be a super wolf to live, she said. Poor Jello was not. She left him to the jaguars and foxes. Amarok, wolf, my friend, she sang as she walked along. Amarok, my adopted father. Reaching Point Hope seemed less important now that she had come to truly understand the value of her ulo and needles. If she missed the boat, she could live well until another year. Her voice rang out happily as she sang, and she followed the birds and her compass. So she's getting used to life in the wilderness and kind of even enjoying herself to a certain extent. Now that she realized that she has these tools that are important to her and that she can actually use to sustain her life, she doesn't feel as scared. And she's probably not enjoying herself, but she has more confidence in her ability to keep herself alive. All right, next kind of section here. One evening, as she looked for a campsite, she felt lonely. To amuse herself, she thought of the hill where the White House stood in San Francisco. When it seemed almost real enough to touch and very beautiful, it vanished abruptly, for the tundra was even more beautiful. A glistening gold, and its shadows were purple and blue. Lemon yellow clouds sailed a green sky, and every wind-tossed sedge was a silver thread. Oh, she whispered in awe, and stopped where she was to view the painted earth. As she dropped her pack, it clanged out a frozen note, reminding her again that autumn was over. The season had been brief. The flash of bird wings, the thunder of migrating herds, that was all. Now it was winter, and the top of the soil was solid. No blue sea would be lapping the shores of Barrow. Instead, the Arctic Ocean would be a roaring white cauldron, foaming icebergs that would join the land with the polar cap. She was not afraid. Singing her Amarok song, she gathered grass and rolled it into little cylinders. With deft strokes, she chopped a hole in the icebound lake, soaked the grass sticks, and laid them out in the air to freeze. Hours later, they had snapped and crackled into ice poles. She cut the drag in 2 pieces, and pushing the poles under one piece, she erected a tent. Inside her shelter, she cut a long thread of hide and twisted it into a snare. A snowshoe rabbit trail ran along the lake, and she set off to find a resting place of the one who had made it. The air was cold, and she blew her breath into the wolverine trim of her parka hood. There it hung and warmed her face. Hi, everybody. Welcome into everybody who just came in. I try not to speak too much when I'm reading so that everyone can just listen to the story, but thank you all for coming. There it hung and warmed her face. Amara called and she called back, not to tell him she needed food as she had once done, but to tell him where she was. Oh. A lemming burst out of the grass near her foot, and she spun around to look for its nest and young. Not finding them, she turned back in time to see a fox ripple like a ribbon as he pounced and sped off with the lemming. If you guys don't know, lemmings are like little, like voles or shrews. They're kind of like little tiny, like a little bigger than a mouse, but kind of like a little wild hamster. I think they're related to hamsters and voles and shrews. When I first read this book, I was very young and I didn't know what a lemming was. So in case you guys don't know, that's what they are. So they're like little mice that are like zipping around on the tundra. They're little Arctic hamsters. Just filling you guys in with things that I didn't know when I was a kid. That way you guys know. Oh, because yeah, I read this the first time when I was a kid, and I did not know what a lemming was. And they're not really like, I don't think we really have many of them around here. I think there are like 2 types of lemmings in New Hampshire, but they're very rare, and they mostly just get confused with shrews because they look very similar. Courtney says, cool little mouse shrew lem. Yeah, little lemming. They're cute, actually. You guys want to see a lemming? Hold on. I can show you a lemming. It's a lemming, watch. Isn't that cute? Cute little lemming. Courtney says, lemming, I want to see one. Courtney says, aw, yeah, they're like little hamsters. Little Arctic hamsters. Look at this little one. This guy holding one. It has little cheeks. Yeah, little mini guinea pigs. Kinda. They do kind of look like guinea pigs. They have like that body type. Lemming. Yeah, like a beaver. Maybe not a beaver, because beaver have those long flat tails. They don't really look like beavers. I've seen beavers, but like kind of like a groundhog, maybe. Like tiny little groundhogs. So yeah, that's a lemming. So you can picture them in your mind running around. This is an animal channel after all, so. All right, a lemming burst out of the grass near her foot, and she spun around to look for its nest and young. Not finding them, she turned back in time to see a fox ripple like a ribbon as he pounced and sped off with the lemming. She grinned, made a mental note to be quicker, and walked carefully along the rabbit trail. Finally, she came upon a concave dish in the ground, the roost. In it, the rabbit would hide from enemies or rest when not eating. She spread her snare, elevated it with an ice stick, and paid out enough hide line to be able to be out of sight of the hare. Flat on her stomach, she watched the roost. Minutes turned into hours, and the pinks and greens of the sunset colored. Oh, hold on, I gotta plug the phone back in. Let's do that before I die. My phone was getting real low. That's also why I can't use my microphone tonight, because my battery's too low. What is the purpose of a lemming? I don't know, they're just little wild animals. What's the purpose of a mouse or any animal, really? They're just part of the cycle of life. They feed the foxes. Yeah, what's the purpose of anything? What is the meaning of life? It's kind of one of those things, like, what is the whole meaning of life? You'd have to figure that out first. But yeah, I don't know, it's a circle of life. The foxes eat the lemmings, and the wolves eat the foxes, or the, vultures eat the dead foxes. And then the, I don't know, whatever eats the vultures. It kind of, just the circle of life. You need small things to feed the big things. Okay, flat on her stomach, she watched the roost. Minutes turned into hours, and the pinks and greens of the sunset colored the frozen prairie. Suddenly, down the trail, ears back, feet flying, came the rabbit. It made a sharp turn and plopped to a halt in its roost. Mayax yanked and caught its left hind foot. She killed it quickly and ran back to camp. She made like a little snare, is what that was. So you like hold a thing, and it's like a thing that like a loop that it. I don't know if you guys have seen like survival shows where they make like little things. They're like little rabbit loop things. They like loops around, and then you go and hide somewhere and you pull it when the rabbit comes through. So she made like something like that. Oh. No, I'm not a fan of bologna. Exactly, Courtney. Cycle of life. She killed it quickly and ran back to camp. The grass rustled and she turned around. Kapoo! He was trotting down the rabbit trail with a leg of caribou in his mouth. His head bucked as he fought the awkward weight of the meat. Kapoo, she repeated. He wagged his tail, took a better grip on his burden, and trotted up to her. He dropped it at her feet. With a skip and a leap, she told him in wolf language how glad she was to see him. He replied by dashing around in a small circle and then 3 big circles. Finally, he stopped and wagged his tail. Is this for me? She asked, pointing to the leg. He spanked the ground with his front paw, leapt to the side, and spanked the ground again. With a grin, she reached in her pocket, found a strip of caribou hide, and thrust it at him. Kapoo snatched it, and with one pull not only wrested it from her, but sent her sprawling on her back. Tail held straight out, he streaked like a rocket across the lichens, turned and came back with the hide. He shook it in front of her, daring her to take it away. You're much too strong for me now, Kapoo, she said slowly and got to her feet. I can't play with you any more. Shaking the hide, he danced, barked, and then ran over the tundra until he was but a speck in the distance. My ex laughed and dragged the caribou leg back to her tent. She cut it up and built a small fire. She skinned the rabbit, saving the fur to line her new mittens. As the stew cooked, the crackling cold inspired her to dance. She stepped forward on the vast stage at the top of the world and bowed to her immense audience. Hey, amazing Joshua, welcome back. Yeah, we're all going to sub to you when we leave here, so... Curving her arms out, bending her knees, she hopped on one foot and beat time with the other. Then she glided and shifted her weight gracefully, executing a combination of steps which the bent woman had danced to long ago at SEAL camp. When she came to the refrain, however, she did not do the dance about evil spirits, but improvised, as Eskimos do at this point. She told the story of a young wolf who had brought the lost girl a shank of meat, and ended the performance with a Kapoo-like caper. She spun laughing to a stop. She was warm and her blood tingled. Eely, she thought. The old Eskimo customs are not so foolish. They have purpose. I'm as warm as the center of a lemming's nest. Oh, they danced to stay warm. As the sky darkened, Kapoo came back. He barked softly. I know what you want, she called, holding out a large piece of cooked meat. Oh, Kapoo's learning to like cooked food. He didn't bring the food to her. He brought it to her to cook. He said, here, cook this up for me. Make me dinner. Smart wolf. I know what you want, she called, holding out a large piece of cooked meat. Kapoo took it so gently from her fingers that she could not even feel his teeth. As she watched him run off into the night, her eyes lifted to the sky. There, twinkling in the distance, was the North Star, the permanent light that had guided the Eskimos for thousands of years. She sang, bright star, lead me to the sea. Hastily, she cut the remaining half of her caribou skin into 4 strips and a circle. Cracking open the ice on the lake, she weighted the pieces with stones and sent them to the bottom. Around midnight, she awoke to hear her wolves in the distance, talking softly amongst themselves, probably paying tribute to Amarok as they moved along the trail, she thought. Peering out of her tent, she saw that the star was gone. A cold flake struck her nose, melted, and fell into her fur and froze. The wind blared and the wolves called joyously, and Mayak snuggled deep in her furs. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Kapoo had known it was coming and had brought food for her. Aw, that's sweet. Joshua said I was just stopping in to listen for a minute, but I gotta go now. Busy now, thanks. Thank you for coming by, Joshua. Yeah, we're just doing story time tonight, so thank you for coming by. Definitely come back and have a listen. We leave the stories up so anyone can listen to them at any time. If you miss any of the story and want to hear how it goes, feel free to come back and listen later. Bye. They're good to see you. Sleep well. Have a good night. Okay, let's see. Kapoo had known it was coming, the snow, and had brought food for her. She slept until daybreak and saw that it was still snowing and dozed off and on, through the white, wild days as the weasels and foxes did. That night the sky cleared, and at dawn she crawled out of her skins. The tundra was white with the snow that would lock up the Arctic till June. The cold had deepened. After breakfast, she cracked open the lake ice again, pulled out the water-soaked circle, and laid it out on the ground. Using her man's knife, She turned up the edges, tied them in place, and let the cup freeze in the air. As it hardened, she stepped into the bottom, tramped it into a bowl, and then cut 2 holes in one side. Through these she ran leather thongs and tied them together. Next she took 2 strips of skin from the water and held them in place while they froze to the bottom of the bowl in the shape of flat rockers. Then she stood up. Her sled was done. Oh, that's a good idea. Isn't that interesting? That's what I love about this book, is it like describes these like interesting ways that the Eskimos would build things. She takes her hide, like the hide from her, like, I don't know if you guys like caught the whole description there, but she took the hide from like her, just like an animal hide, that her big sleeping skin thing that she had, and she put it into the ice water to get it frozen, basically. It would wet so it would freeze, and then she took it out and like shaped it into, she like turned the edges up and shaped it into a like kind of like a long cup like this. Just turn the edges of the thing up and then sat it there and let it freeze. So now it's wet, it's gonna freeze solid and hard. So it made like a hard, because it's like leather, frozen leather basically, made like a hard little scoopy bowl. And then she took the other strips that she made, she cut off pieces of it and made other strips, and then she hardened those and stuck them to the other part of it to make a sled so that she can pull a sled. Probably with all her belongings and stuff. It's kind of interesting. It's just, I love how this book like describes like different crazy ways that the Eskimos would do things. The woman who wrote this book spent time like in the Arctic Circle when she was writing this book, so she like actually spent time with the Inuit people and like learned how they do things. So it's not all just like made up. She actually like spent time there for a while. Let's see. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Using her man's knife, she turned up the edges, tied them in place, and let the cup freeze in the air. As it hardened, she stepped into the bottom and tramped it into a bowl, and then cut 2 holes in one side. Through these, she ran leather thongs and tied them together. So she's got holes, and then she's going to tie it together to make like a pulley. Next, she took the 2 strips of skin from the water and held them in place while they froze to the bottom of the bowl in the shape of flat rockers. Then she stood up. Her sled was done. Working quickly, for she had only a few hours of daylight, she formed the tear-shaped hoops out of the last 2 strips. These she laid out to freeze. When they were solid, she webbed them with hide, made loops for her toes, and put them on her snowshoes. They crackled and snapped, but kept her up on the drifts. Now she could travel on top of the snow. She made little makeshift snowshoes, too. She cut the rest of the caribou leg into bite-sized chunks and stored them in her sled. Then, adjusting her mittens in the darkness, she took a bearing on the North Star and started off. Her icy sled jingled over the wind-swept lakes, and she sang as she traveled. The stars grew brighter as the hours passed, and the tundra began to glow, for the snow reflected each twinkle a billion times over, turning the night to silver. By this light she could see the footsteps of the wolves. She followed them, for they were going her way. Just before sunrise, the wolf prints grew closer together. They were slowing down for the sleep. She felt their presence everywhere, but could not see them. Running out on the lake, she called. Shadows flickered on top of a frost heave. There they were! She quickened her stride. She would camp with them and do the dance of the wolf pup feeding the lost girl for Kapoo. He would surely run in circles when he saw it. The shadows flattened as she walked, and by the time she reached the other shore, they had turned into sky and vanished. There were no footsteps in the snow to say her pack had been there, and she knew the Arctic dawn had tricked her eyes. Frost spirits, she said, as she pitched her tent by the lake and crawled into bed. By the yellow-green light of the low noon sun, Maya could see that she had camped on the edge of the wintering grounds of the caribou. Their many gleaming antlers formed a forest on the horizon. Such a herd would certainly attract her pack. She crawled out of bed and saw that she had pitched her tent in a tiny forest about 3 inches high. Her heart pounded excitedly, for she had not seen one of these willow groves since Nunavak. She was making progress, for they grew not near Barrow, but in slightly warmer and wetter lands near the coast. She smelled the air in the hopes that it bore the same salty odor of the ocean, but it smelled only of the cold. The dawn cracked and hummed, and the snow was so fine that it floated above the ground when a breeze stirred. Not a bird passed overhead. The buntings, longspurs, and terns were gone from the top of the world. A willow ptarmigan and the chicken of the chicken of the tundra, clucked behind her and whistled softly as it hunted. I don't know if it's ptarmigan or ptarmigan. It says Ptarmigan. Ptarmigan, a willow ptarmigan, the chicken of the tundra, clucked behind her and whistled softly as it hunted seeds. The Arctic Circle had been returned to its permanent bird resident, the hardy ptarmigan. The millions of voices of summer had died down to one plaintive note. Aha! Ah ha ha! Ah ha ha! Mayak sat up, wondering what that was. Sounds like my chickens outside. Creeping halfway out of her bag, she peered into the sky to see a great brown bird maneuver its wings and speed west. A skua! She was closer to the ocean than she thought, for the skua is a bird of coastal waters of the Arctic. As her eyes followed it, they came to rest on an oil drum, the signpost of American civilization in the north. How excited she would have been to see this a month ago. Now she was not so sure. She had her ulo and needles, her sled and her tent, and the world of her ancestors, and she liked the simplicity of that world. It was easy to understand. Out here she understood how she fitted into the scheme of the moon and the stars and the constant rise and fall of life on earth. Even the snow was part of her. She melted it and drank it. Amarok barked. He sounded as if he was no more than a quarter of a mile away. "Oh, oh!" she called. Nails answered, and then the whole pack howled briefly. "I'm over here," she shouted joyously, jumping up and down. "Here, by the lake." She paused. "You know that. You know everything about me all the time." The wind began to rise as the sun started back to the horizon. The lake responded with a boom that sounded like a pistol shot. The freeze was deepening. Mayax lit a fire and put on her pot. A warm stew would taste good, and the smoke and flames would make the tundra home. Presently, Amarok barked forcefully, and the pack answered. Then the royal voice sounded from another position, and Silver checked in from across the lake. Nails gave a warning snarl, and the puppies whispered in woofs. Mayak shaded her eyes. Her wolves were barking from points around a huge circle, and she was in the middle. This was strange. They almost always stayed together. Suddenly, Amarok barked ferociously, his voice angry and authoritative. Silver yelped, and then Nails and Kapoo. They had something at bay. She stepped onto the lake and skipped towards them. Halfway across, she saw a dark head rise above the hill, and a beast with a head as large as the moon rose to its hind feet, massive paws swinging. "Grizzly!" she gasped, and stopped stone still. As the huge animal rushed onto the ice, Amarok and Nails leapt at its face and sprang away before the bear could strike. They were heading it off, trying to prevent it from crossing. The bear snarled and lunged forward and galloped towards Mayax. She ran towards her tent. The wind was in her face, and she realized that she was downwind of the bear, her scent blowing right to him. She started off in another direction, for bears have poor eyesight and cannot track if they cannot smell. Slipping and sliding, she reached the south bank as the grizzly staggered forward, then crumpled to its knees and sat down. She wondered why he was not in hibernation. The wolves had been sleeping all day. They could not have wakened the bear. She sniffed the air to try to smell the cause, but only odorless ice crystals stung her nose. The pack kept harassing the sleepy beast, barking and snarling, but with no intention of killing it. They were simply trying to drive it away from her, she realized. Slowly the bear got to its feet and permitted itself to be herded up the lake bank back to where it had come from. Reluctantly, blindly, it staggered before the wolves. Occasionally it stood up like a giant, but mostly it roared in the agony of sleepiness. Sounds like me, the agony of sleepiness. That's me when I get woken up too early. Rawr! Let me go back to sleep. I'm in agony of sleepiness. Yapping, barking, darting, the wolves drove the grizzly far out on the tundra. Finally, they veered away, and breaking into a joyous gallop, they dashed over the snow and out of sight. Their duty done. They were running not to hunt, not to kill, but simply for fun. Myax was trembling. She had not realized the size and ferocity of the dark bear of the north, who is called grizzly inland and brown bear along the coasts. Ursus arctos, large ones like the grizzly, her wolves had driven away, weighed over 1,000 pounds and stood 9 feet tall when they reared. Myax wiped a bead of perspiration from her forehead. Had he come upon her tent with one curious sweep of his paw, he could have snuffed out her life while she slept. Amarok, Nails, Kapoo, she called. I thank you, I thank you. As she packed to travel on, she thought about her escorts. Wolves did not like civilization. Where they had once dwelled all over North America, they now lived in remote parts of Canada, in only 2 of the lower 48 states, and in the wilderness of Alaska. Even the roadless North Slope had fewer wolves than it did before the Gussicks erected their military bases and brought airplanes, snowmobiles, electricity, and jeeps to the Arctic. As she thought about the Gussicks, that's their term for white people, by the way. Ivana says, now I can go to bed. Yeah, Gussicks, if you don't remember, is their term for like the white person, the more civilized people who like follow the just like regular stuff, the people who don't follow the old way of like their old Eskimo traditions. It's just like basic white dude. Basic white bitch. Gusuk. As she thought about the Gusuks, she suddenly knew why the brown bear was awake. The Americans' hunting season had begun. Her wolves were in danger. The Gussicks were paid to shoot them. A man who brought in the left ear of a wolf to the warden was rewarded with a bounty of $50. The bounty was evil to the old men at Seal Camp, for it encouraged killing for money rather than need. Kapugan considered the bounty the Gusik's way of deciding that the Amaroks could not live on this earth anymore. And no men have that right, he would say. When the wolves are gone, there will be too many caribou grazing the grass, and the lemmings will starve. Without the lemmings, the foxes and the birds and weasels will die. Their passing will end smaller lives upon which even man depends, whether he knows it or not, and the top of the world will pass into silence. See, it's all about the circle of life. The lemmings need to feed the foxes, and the birds and the weasels and everything else. So it says, without the lemmings, the foxes and birds and weasels will die. Their passing will end smaller lives, upon which even man depends, whether he knows it or not, and the top of the world will pass into silence. Myax was worried. The oil drum she had seen when the skua flew over marked the beginning of civilization and the end of the wilderness. She must warn her pack of the danger ahead. She had learned to say many things to them, but now the most important of all, the ear twist or bark that would turn them back, she did not know. How, she thought, do I shout, go away, go far away? She sang, go away, royal wolf, go away, do not follow. I'm a gun at your head when I pass the oil drum. Threads of clouds spun up from the earth and trailed across the tundra. They marked the beginning of a whiteout. Myax changed her plans to travel that night and crept into her shelter. She watched the air turn white as the snow arose from the ground and hung all around her. She closed her tent flap and took out her pot. In it she put a piece of fat from the bladder bag and a scrap of sinew. She lit the sinew and had a flame illuminate her tiny home. She took out her comb. As she carved, she saw that it was not a comb at all, but Amarok. The teeth were his legs, the handle his head. He was waiting to be released from the bone. Surprised to see him, she carved carefully for hours, and finally she let him out. Remember the little bone that Kapu brought her? He brought her a little bone, and she was trying to carve it into like a comb, like to brush her hair. And instead, she like kind of saw the outline of a wolf. So she decided to carve it into like a little wolf statue instead. So she turned it into Armorok. As she carved, she saw that it was not a comb at all, but Amarok. The teeth were his legs, the teeth of the comb, the handle his head, and he was waiting to be released from the bone. Surprised to see him, she carved carefully for hours, and finally she let him out. His neck was arched, his head and tail were lifted, even his ears had a message. I love you, they said. Aw. A bird called faintly in the darkness. Mayax wondered what kind it was and what it was doing so far north at this date. Too sleepy to think, she unlaced her boots, undressed, and folded her clothes. The bird called from the edge of her sleeping skin. Holding her candle above her head, she crept towards the door and peered into the bright eyes of a golden plover. He was young, for he wore the splotched plumage of the juvenile and still had a trace of baby yellow around his beak. He slumped against her skins. Gently, she slipped her hand under his feet and picked him up and brought him closer to her. His black and gold feathers gleamed in the sputtering light. She had never beheld a plover so closely, and now understood why Capugan had called them the spirit of the birds. The plover's golden eye and red noseband made it look like one of the dancers in the bladder feast. You are lost, she said. You should be far from here, perhaps in Labrador, perhaps even in your winter home on the plains of Argentina. And so you are dying. You need insects and meat. But I'm so glad you're here. Then she added, I shall call you Tornait, the bird spirit. She eased the bird inside her warm sleeping skin, cut off a small piece of caribou meat, and held it out. Tornait ate ravenously and then rested. She fed him once more, and then tucked his head in his back, and then he tucked his head in his back feathers and went to sleep. Aw, this little young bird that he was supposed to migrate south in the winter because it's getting cold, and he didn't make it. So now he's stuck in the Arctic without any food because all the food goes away in the winter for the birds to eat. So he basically came to her like, I need help. So she's keeping him warm and giving him food. That's very sweet. I forgot all about this bird. I don't remember the bird. I don't remember a bird in this story, but it is kind of at the end here. I don't know what happens to him. She fed him once more, and then he tucked his head in his back feathers and went to sleep. The following night, the whiteout was still so dense she could not see the ground when she crept out for snow to melt and drink. Pink poop. Pink poo stew. When she crept out for snow to melt and drink. I won't go on tonight, she said to Tornait when she came inside. But I do not care. I have food, light, furs, fire, and a pretty companion. The bird. That evening she polished her carving of Amarok and talked to Tornait. The plover was incredibly tame, perhaps because he lived in the most barren parts of the world, where there were no men, perhaps because he was lonely. Tornait ran over her skins, flitted to her head and shoulders, and sang when she sang. On the next afternoon, the whiteout was but a frosty mist. Mayax was cooking dinner when Tornait drew his feathers to his body and stood up in alarm. She listened for a long time before she heard the snow scream as footsteps pressed it. Scrambling to the door, she saw Capu in the mist, frost on his whiskers. Hi, she called. He did not turn around, for he was looking at something in the distance. Presently, Amarok swept into view and stopped beside him. Amarok, she shouted. Amarok, how are you? Tossing her head in wolf happiness, she crawled out of her tent on all fours and nudged him under the chin. He arched his neck grandly. Then, with a glance at Capu, he ran out on the lake. The young wolf followed, and laughing joyously, Mayax crawled after them both. She had not gone far before Amarok stopped and glared at her. She stayed where she was. The regal pair leaped away, snow billowing up from their strides like smoke. Getting to her knees, she looked for Silver, Nails, and the other pups, but they did not follow the pair. Mayax rocked back on her heels. Could it be that the leader of the pack was teaching the leader of the pups? She nodded slowly as she comprehended. Of course, to be a leader required not only fearlessness and intelligence, but experience and schooling. The head of a wolf pack needed to be trained, and who better to do this than Amarok? And I know what you'll teach, she called out. You'll teach him which animal to harvest. You'll teach him to make all decisions. You'll teach him how to close in on a caribou and where to bed the wolf pack down. And you'll teach him to love and protect. The whiteout vanished, the stars blazed out, and San Francisco called to Mayax. It was time to move on. Kapu was now in school. But how shall I tell them not to follow me anymore? She asked Tornayet as she crawled back into her tent. Of course, she gasped. She had been told by Amarok herself how to say, stay back, when he had wanted Kapu alone. He had walked forward, turned around, and glared into her eyes. She had stopped in her tracks and gone home. Eagerly she practiced. She ran forward, looked over her shoulder, and glared. It's like... Stay, Amarok. Stay where you are. Humming to herself, she took down her tent, rolled it into a bundle, and threw it on the new sled. Then she stuffed her pack and tucked Tornayet in the hood of her parka. Sticking her toes in her snowshoes, she took a bearing on the constant star. The snow squeaked under her feet, and for the first time she felt the dry bite of the cold right through her parka and boots. To her, this meant that the temperature was 0, the point every year when she began to feel chilly. That's how I feel up here. It's like 30 ain't that bad. Don't get cold till it's like 0. Like single digits. To her, this meant the temperature was 0, the point every year when she began to feel chilly. Dancing and swinging her arms to get warm, she picked up the thongs of her sled and walked towards the sea. The sled glided lightly behind her. She did not hear the airplane, she saw it. The low sun of noon struck its aluminum body, and it sparkled like a star in the sky. It was a small plane, the type bush pilots use to carry people over the roadless tundra and across the rugged mountains of Alaska where cars cannot go. Presently its sound reached her ears, and the throb of engines reminded her that this was the beginning of the season when bush pilots took the gussicks out to hunt. The craft tipped its wings and zigzagged across the sky. When it continued to zag, she realized the pilot was following a meandering river where game wintered. A river, she thought. A river leads to the sea. I am nearing the end of my journey. Point Hope might be but one sleep away. She quickened her pace. The airplane banked, turned, and came towards her. It seemed as big as an eagle, and it skimmed low over the ground. Bright flashes of fire burst from its side. They are hunting, she said to Tornayet. Let's get in the oil drum. I look like a bear in these clothes. Hi, Carlos. How are you? Welcome in. And hi, XOXO. Welcome back. Just before she reached the drum, she crossed the footsteps of Amarok and Kapu. They had passed this way only moments ago, for the snow crystals their warm feet had melted were not yet frozen again. The plane continued to come toward her. Apparently, she had been seen. She kicked snow over her sled and pack and crawled to the front of the barrel. It was sealed, and she could not get inside. Scurrying to the other end, she found that it too was closed. Desperately, she threw herself under the curve of the drum and lay still. Much of her was still exposed. Flailing her hands and feet, she stirred up the light snow. It arose like a cloud and settled upon her as the plane soared above. Shots rang out. She looks like a bear from up above in her big skin parkas. She's got like fur coat and parka. So she's worried she looks like a bear walking across the tundra. Shots rang out, the plane roared away, and Mayax opened her eyes. She was still alive, and the air hunters were over the river. The plane banked and flew back, this time very low. Tornait struggled. "Be still," she said. The gunfire snapped again, and eyes wide open, she saw that it was not aimed at her. "Amarok!" Horrified, she watched him leap into the air as a splatter of shots burst beside him. Digging his claws, he veered to the right and left as Kapu ran to join him. Teeth bared, angrily growling, Amarok told him to go. Kapu sped off. The plane hesitated and then pursued Amarok. Shots hit the snow in front of him. He reared and turned. "Amarok!" she screamed. "Here! Come here!" The plane swerved, dove, and skimmed about 30 feet above the ground. Its guns blasted. Amarok stumbled, pressed back his ears, and galloped across the tundra like a shooting star. Then he reared and dropped on the snow. Oh. The plane swerved, dove, and skimmed about 30 feet above the ground. Its guns blasted. Amarok stumbled, pressed back his ears, and galloped across the tundra like a shooting star. Then he reared and dropped on the snow. He was dead. "For a bounty!" she screamed. "For money! The magnificent Amarok is dead!" Her throat constricted with grief and sobs choked her. I could hold it together, but I bawled my eyes out. And this happened when I was a kid. The plane banked and came, still like, small. The plane banked and came back. Kapu was running to Amarok. His ears were pressed to his head and his legs moved so swiftly they were a blur. Bullets showered the snow around him. He leaped, dodged, and headed for the oil drum. His wide eyes and open mouth told Mayax he was afraid for the first time in his life. Blindly he ran, and as he came by, she reached out and tripped him. He sprawled across the snow and lay still. While the plane coasted off to make another turn, she covered Kapu with flakes. She's like burying him in the snow. The snow turned red with blood from his shoulder. Mayax rolled under the barrel. The air exploded and she stared up into the belly of the plane. Bolts, doors, wheels, red, white, silver, and black. The plane flashed before her eyes. In that instant, she saw cities, bridges, radios, school books. She saw the pink bedroom, the pink room, long highways, TV sets, telephones, and electric lights. Black exhaust enveloped her, and civilization became this monster that snarled across the sky. The plane shrank before her eyes, and then turned and grew big again. Tornait flew to the top of the barrel, screaming his alarm cry and beating his wings. Kapu tried to get up. "Don't move," Mayax whispered. "They're coming for Amarok." Knowing Kapu did not understand, she reached out and softly stroked him, singing, "Lie still, lie still." She watched him slump back into the snow without a sound. The plane returned at so low a level she could see the men in the cockpit, their coat collars pulled up around their necks, their crash helmets and goggles gleaming. They were laughing and watching the ground. Desperately, Mayax thought about Silver, Nails, and the pups. Where were they? They must be clear targets on the white snow. Maybe not. They were lighter in color, not black, like Amarok. Suddenly, the engine accelerated. The wing flaps pressed down and the craft climbed, banked, and sailed down the river like a migrating bird. It did not turn around. Mayax buried her fingers in Kapu's fur. "They did not even stop to get him," she cried. "They did not even kill him for money. I don't understand. I don't understand." "Ta von go von ga," she cried. "Pesupa gasu punga." She spoke of her sadness in Eskimo, for she could not recall any English. Kapu's blood spread like fresh
like fish ripples on the snow. She wriggled to him and clamped her thumb on the vein that was gushing. She held the pressure a minute, an hour, she did not know how long. Then Tornait called hungrily. Cautiously, she lifted her hand. The bleeding had stopped. Ta gasu, she said to Kapu. I think that means like thank God. She brushed the snow off her sled and took out her poles. She set up her tent beside the barrel, banked the snow around the bottom to seal out the wind, and spread her ground cloth under it. When she tried to push Kapu into the shelter, she found him too heavy. He lifted his head and then dropped it wearily. Mayax decided to build the tent around him. She took everything down and started all over again. This time she eased the ground skin under him inch by inch until he lay on the fur. Then she kicked the oil drum to free it from the ice, and rolled it close to him and erected her tent against it. She sealed the gaps with snow. The drum was old, for it had different markings than those around Barrow, but like them, it was barely rusted. The frigid winters and the dry, desert-like conditions of the tundra prevent metals and papers, garbage and refuse from deteriorating as it does in warmer zones. In the Arctic, all artifacts are preserved for ages. Even throwing them into the ocean does not work a change, for the water freezes around them, and as icebergs they come back on the shores. The summer sun unveils them again. Mayax melted snow, cut off meat for Tornait, and fed him. He flew down from the barrel and ran into the tent. Hopping onto her furry sleeping skin, he puffed his feathers, stood on one foot, and went to sleep. With the stew bubbling, Kapu resting, and Tornait asleep, Mayax dared to think of Amarok. She would go and bid him goodbye. She tried to get up, but she could not move. Grief held her in a vice-like clamp. About an hour later, Kapu lifted his head, rolled his eyes around the cozy interior of the tent, and accepted chunks of stew. Mayax petted his head and told him in Eskimo to lie still while she looked at his wound. It was long and deep, and she knew it must be sewn together. Taking a piece of sinew from the ground skin, she threaded it into her needle and pierced the soft flesh. Kapu growled. Zoler pajo sexo, she sang soothingly. Lupir pajo se sori vanga pangamane. Mahoriva, pangmane. Monotonously repeating over and over the healing song of the old bent lady, she hypnotized Kapu as she closed the wound. The perspiration was running down her cheeks when she was done. If anyone here speaks Inuit, do not come for me, by the way. I'm just reading whatever the heck these words say the best I can. Zolor paho sexo pajwa pajua se sori vango pangamani maho riva. So yeah, don't come for me. If anyone actually speaks Inuit, I know there's like probably a way to actually say that, but however you're supposed to say it, I do not know. I'm Italian, not American speaking Italian, and I do not know Inuit language here. Monotonously repeating over and over the healing song of the old bent lady, she hypnotized Kapu as she closed the wound. The perspiration was running down her cheeks when she was done. Oh. I don't know why they show 3 wolves here, but maybe this is later. This is, I think, when she goes to check on Kapu, but this, I think that's Amarok who got shot. And then that's probably Kapu because he was black too. And then that might be Silver because she's lighter colored. And then little Tornait the bird. And Mayax / Julie. So that's when they go to say goodbye to him. Poor baby. He got shot. perspiration was running down her cheeks when she was done, but she was able to tell him that he would get well and return to lead their pack. The sun set in a navy blue sky, and the stars sparkled on and off as they spoke of their vast distances from Earth. About midnight, the inside of the tent began to glow green, and Kapu's eyes shone like emeralds. Mayax peered out the flap door. Fountains of green fire rose from the earth and shot to the top of the black velvet sky. Red and white lights sprayed out of the green. The northern lights were dancing. The lakes boomed, and nails howled mournfully beyond the tent. Mayax howled back to tell him where she was. Then Silver barked, and the pups called too. Each voice sounded closer than the last. The pack was coming towards the oil drum as they searched for Amarok and Kapu. Oh. Mayax stepped into the light of the aurora. It was time to bid Amarok farewell. She tried to go forward, but her feet would not move. Grief still held them useless. Clutching her left knee in both hands, she lifted her foot and put it down. Then she lifted the other and put it down, slowly making her way across the turquoise snow. Amarok lay where he had fallen, his fur shining in the strange magnetic light. Amarok. She took her carving from her pocket and got down on her knees. Singing softly in Eskimo, she told him she had no bladder for his spirit to dwell in, but that she had his totem. She asked him to enter the totem and be with her forever. For a long time she held the carving over his body. Presently the pain in her breast grew lighter as she knew the wolf was with her. The stars had slipped down the sky when at last she stood up and walked swiftly back to Kapu. All night Mayax sat beside him and listened to Silver, Nails, and the pups. "Oh, oh, oh," they cried in a tone she had never heard before. She knew they were crying for Amarok. The sun went down on November 10th, not to arise again for 66 days. In the darkness, Kapu got up to exercise by walking out on the tundra and back. Tornayet was not so comfortable in the continuous night. He slept in Mayax's furs most of the time, waiting for the dawn. When it did not come, hunger awoke him. He ran from his roost to Mayax, pecked on her boot, and fluttered his wings for food. Then the darkness would say to him, "Sleep," and he would run back to his roost, pull his foot into his breast feathers, and close his eyes. For her part, Mayax found the clear nights quite manageable. She could hunt caribou chips by star and moonlight, cook outside, and even sew. When the sky was overcast, however, the tundra was black, and she would stay inside, light her candle, and talk to Kapu and Tornayet. Country said, "Never we love story time." Yeah, Winchester likes story time. All for Winchester. Don't tell Winchester the doggies got shot, though. He'll start worrying. Cover his ears. You gotta cover his ears when bad things happen to the doggies. Say, "Winchester, you don't have to think about that. We'll never let anything like that happen to you." Okay, however, the tundra was black when the sky was overcast, and she would stay inside, light her candle, and talk to Kapu and Tornayet. At this time, she began to shape the antler weapon into a more elaborate design. As she worked, she saw 5 puppies in it. Carefully, she carved out their ears and toes until they were running in a single file, Kapu in the lead. She grew tired, took out Amarok's totem, and thought about his life and brave spirit. "The pink room is red with your blood," she said. "I cannot go there. But where can I go? Not back to Barrow and Daniel. Not back to Nunavak and Martha. And you cannot take care of me anymore." Snowstorms came and went. The wind blew constantly. One starry night, Mayax heard a whimper and opened the tent flap to see Silver at the door. She had a large hair in her mouth, and although Mayax was glad for the food, she was distressed to realize that her pack was not eating well. Disorganized without Amarok, they were forced to hunt rabbits and small game. These would not sustain them. Mayax reached out, petted Silver on the shoulder, and felt her bony back. Without a leader, the pack would not live through the winter. Silver nudged her hand. Mayax opened the flap wider, and the beautiful wolf came in. She dropped the rabbit and walked over to Kapoo. He got to his feet and, arcing his neck, lifted his head above hers. She greeted him, wagging her tail excitedly. Aw, this is Kapoo's mommy. Silver's the mommy wolf. She's the mom of the baby, so she's like reuniting with her baby who got hurt. He's like an adult / teenage baby now. He's like almost an adult, but not quite. So she's coming to check on her baby. That's very sweet. She dropped the rabbit and walked over to Kapoo. He got to his feet and, arcing his neck, he lifted his head above hers. She greeted him, wagging her tail excitedly. Then she tried to bite the top of his nose to tell him she was the leader, but Kapoo drew up tall. Gently, he took her nose in his mouth. She bit him under the chin, hailing the new chief. Kapoo pushed past her and slipped out of the tent. Silver followed the prince of the wolves. In the darkness, he sang of his leadership, but too weak to run, turned warily back to the tent. A new grandeur attached to his movements as he came through the door, and Mayak squeezed his chin. He lay down and watched her skin the rabbit. She gave him the flesh and went out to hunt lemmings for herself. Since the end of summer, the little rodents had doubled, tripled, and even quadrupled their numbers. By following their runways, she found 7 nests and caught 80 furred young. Wow. It's a lot of lemmings, but I guess they're real small. She skinned and cooked them and found them delicious. The next night, Silver brought her the side of a moose. She had not killed it, for it was old and frozen. Mayax knew she had been down to the river. No moose wandered the tundra. Several sleeps later, Kapoo ran over the snow without stumbling, and Mayax decided it was time to move to the river. Game would be more abundant in the dwarf willows and aspens that bordered the waterways. There, rabbits and ptarmigan gathered to eat seeds out of the wind, and moose wintered on the twigs of the willows. Perhaps Silver and Nails would find a sick yearling and, with help from the pups, be able to kill it. Life would be kinder there. She packed up, put Tornea in her parka hood, and picking up her sled rope, set off once more. Kapoo limped as he walked beside her, but less and less as they plodded along. The exercises seemed to help him, and by the end of the night he was running 50 steps to her 1. Often he took her hand and mouthed it affectionately. The river would not be hard to find, for she had marked its position by the faithful North Star, and so hours later, as the constellation of the hunter moved to the other side of her, she reached the brushy bank. In the distance loomed the massive wall of the Brooks Range, the treeless mountains that rimmed the north slope on the south. Her journey was coming to an end. The rivers that flow out of the Brooks Range are close to the sea. After making camp, Mayax and Kapoo went out to snare the ptarmigan and rabbits. Silver called from a short distance away, and they answered her. Hours later, when Mayax crawled into her sleeping skin, the wolves were so near that she could hear the pups scratching the snow as they made their beds. As she had anticipated, the hunting was excellent, and upon checking her snares the next day, she found 3 rabbits and 2 ptarmigan. For several days, she was busy skinning and cooking. What is all this? Greg and Cornelius the parrot. My parrots are yapping in the background, too. Can't even tap anything. No, just a little bit of spamming. Yeah, please don't spam. No spamming, please. You'll end up getting timed out. I like anything chocolate, whether it be labs or food. All right, where am I here? As she had anticipated, the hunting was excellent, and upon checking her snares the next day, she found 3 rabbits and 2 ptarmigans. For several days, she was busy skinning and cooking. One night, while Mayak sewed a new boot, Kapoo licked her ear and trotted off. When he did not come back by the time the moon had swung all the way around her tent and was back again, a whole day, she went out to look for him. The snow glowed blue and green, and the constellations glittered, not only in the sky, but on the ice in the river and on the snow and the bushes and the trees. There was, however, no sign of Kaboo. She was about to go to bed when the horizon quivered and she saw her pack running the bank. Kapoo was in the lead. She crawled into her tent and awakened Tornayet. Kapoo's leading the hunt. All's well, she said, and now we must leave them. At dawn, she hastily took down her tent, hoisted her pack to her back, and stepped onto the frozen river where walking was easier. Many miles along the way, she came upon a wolverine tracks and followed them up to a den. There, as she suspected, lay several rabbits and ptarmigans. She loaded them up on her sled and returned to the river. Listening to Tornayet peep soft plover songs and the warmth of her parka hood, she kissed his beak gently. They were helping each other. She kept him warm and fed, and he radiated heat in her hood. But more important, his whisperings kept her from being totally and helplessly lonely without Kapoo and her wolf pack. With every mile she traveled now, the oil drums became more and more numerous, and the tracks of the wolverine more and more scarce. Like the wolf, the wolverine is an animal of the wilderness, and when Mayak saw no more tracks, she knew that she was approaching man. One night she counted 50 drums on a spit in the river, and there she made camp. She must stop and think about what she wanted to do. When she thought of San Francisco, she thought about that airplane, and fire and blood, and the flashes and death. When she took out her needle and sewed, she thought about peace and Armrock. She knew what she had to do. Live like an Eskimo. Hunt and carve and be with Tornayet. The next day she took out her man's knife and cut blocks of snow. These she stacked and shaped into a house that was generously large. If she was going to live as the Eskimos once lived, she needed a home, not just a camp. When her ice house was completed and her skins were spread over the floor, she sat down and took out the totem of Amarok. His fingers had rubbed into a soft glow. Her fingers had rubbed him to a soft glow in her pocket, and he looked rich and regal. Placing him over her door, she blew him a kiss, and as she did so, happiness welled up in her. She knew he was taking care of her spirit. Time passed. Fountains of the magnetic northern lights came and went, and the moon waxed and waned many times. Mayax found her life very satisfying. She became an expert at catching small game, and she took great pleasure in carving. When she had finished the carving of the puppies, she found a stone by the river and began chipping it into an owl. Julie! She's making an owl for you. She began chipping it into an owl. Always she listened for her pack, but they did not call. She was both glad and miserable. Mayax was not without things to do. When she was not hunting or carving, she danced, sewed, chopped wood, or made candles. Sometimes she tried to spell Eskimo words with the English alphabet. Such beautiful words must be preserved forever. One night she began a tiny coat of ptarmigan feathers for Tornayet. He had been shivering lately, even in her parka hood, and she was concerned about him. She stitched the plumes to a paper-thin rabbit hide and fashioned a bird-like coat. Aw, that's adorable. She made a little coat for the bird. On the moonrise, when the coat was finished and she was trying to slip it on Tornayet, she heard in the distance the crackle of feet on ice. The sound grew louder, and she poked her head into the night to see a man on the river running beside his sled and team of dogs. Her heart leapt. An Eskimo hunter, one of her own pack, truly. Rushing onto the river ice, she waited until the sled drew close. "Ai!" she called. "Ai!" a voice answered, and within minutes the hunter pulled the sled up beside her and greeted her warmly. Nestled in the furs was the man's woman and child. Their eyes glistened softly in the moonlight. Maax's voice was hoarse from disuse, but she managed to greet them happily in Eskimo and invite them into her house for a sleep. The woman was glad to stop, and she told Maax in the Yupik dialect as she climbed from the sled. They had not rested since they had left Kangik, a town on the Cook Bay at the mouth of the Avalik River, the river they were on. At last Mayax knew where she was. Kangik was inland from Wainwright, and still many sleeps from Point Barrow, but she no longer cared. I'm Roland, the man said in English as he unloaded his sleeping skins on the floor of the igloo and spread them out. Are you alone? Mayak smiled at him as if she did not understand and put a twisted spruce log on the fire. When it blazed, the man and woman were warming their backs. When it blazed and man and woman were warming their backs, Roland asked her again, but this time in Yupik, her own beautiful tongue. She answered that she was. I'm Alice, the pretty mother said. Mayax gestured hopelessly. Uma, the woman said, pointing to herself. Atik, she said, pointing to the man. Atik, pointing to the man. And lifting the baby above her head, she called him Sorkak. Or Sorkak, maybe, I don't know. Sorqaq. Sorkak. Sorkak. Mayax found the name so nice that as she took her cooking pot from the fire to offer her guests hot ptarmigan, she hummed and sang. Then she went to her sleeping skin, picked up Tornea, and held him before Sorkak, who was now on his mother's back in her cuspuk. He peeked over his shoulder, laughed at the bird, kicked, and disappeared. In his excitement, he had lost his knee grip and dropped to his mother's belt. Mayax laughed aloud. Uma giggled and gave him a boost. His round face reappeared and he reached for the bird. Mayax suddenly wanted to talk. Speaking rapidly in Eskimo, she told her guests about the river, the game, the fuel, and the stars, but not about the wolves or her past. They listened and smiled. When dinner was over, Atik talked slowly and softly, and Mayax learned that Kangik was an Eskimo village with an airport and a mission school. A generator had been built and electricity lighted the houses in winter. A few men even owned snowmobiles there. Atik was proud of his town. Before going to bed, he went out to feed the dogs. Then Uma talked. She said they were headed for the mountains to hunt caribou. When Atik returned, Mayax told him that he did not need to go to the mountains, that a large herd was yarded not too far up the river. She drew a map on the floor and showed him where the wintering grounds of the caribou lay. He was happy to learn this, he said, for the Brooks Range was treacherous in winter. Whole mountainsides avalanched, and storms brewed up there in minutes. Uma nursed the baby and tucked him into their furs, and softly sang him to sleep as the fire began to die down. Presently her head nodded, and she slipped into bed where Atik joined her. Mayax alone was awake, visions of the Kangik filling her head. She would go there and be useful. Perhaps she could teach the children how to snare rabbits, make parkas or carve, or she might live with some family that needed her help. She might even work in the store. In Kangik, she would live as her ancestors had, in rhythm with the animals and the climate. She would stay far away from San Francisco, where men were taught to kill without reason. She did not fall asleep for hours. Tornea awoke first and called her softly. Mayax dressed, cut off a piece of meat, and held it out to him. He snatched the food and swallowed it noisily. That awoke the baby, and the baby awoke Uma, who reached out, took him to her breast, and rocked him as she lay down in the furry warmth of her skins. It was almost 0 in the house, and she did not hurry to get up. Atik awoke, yawned, and roared, I'm hungry. Uma laughed, and Mayax put the pot on the fire. Atik dressed, went out to his sled, and brought back bacon, bread, beans, and butter. Mayax had forgotten there were such good things, and her mouth fairly watered as she smelled them cooking. At first she refused the food when Uma offered it, but seeing how disappointed she was, she accepted the bacon and suckled on it quietly, remembering with pain the tastes of Barrow. After breakfast, Atik went out to harness the dogs. Mayax cleaned up, and Uma played with her baby. As she tossed him, she chatted happily about her love for Atik and how excited she had been when he decided to take her on the hunt. Most Eskimo wives were left home these days, with the advent of Gusik frozen foods, Cooks were no longer needed for the hunt, and the women never tanned hides anymore. All skins for the tourists to trade must go to Seattle to be tanned correctly for the temperature climates where most were shipped. Uma rambled on. Atik had been raised in Anchorage and knew very little about hunting, for his father had been a mechanic. But he had died, and Atik was sent to live with his grandfather in Kangik. He had become enamored of hunting and fishing and became so skilled that when his grandfather died, he was adopted by the greatest of all living Eskimo hunters. Kapugan taught Attic where the seals live and how to smell a caribou trail. Mayax stopped cleaning her pot. Her blood raced hot, then cold. Turning slowly around, she stared at Uma. "Where was this Kapugan born?" she asked in Eskimo. "He has never said. He paddled up the river one day, beached his kayak, and built a house where he landed. All I know is that he came out of the Bering Sea. But he was wealthy in the Eskimo sense, intelligent, fearless, full of love, and he soon became a leader of Kangik." Mayax did not take her eyes off Uma's lips as they formed soft words of Kapugan. "You iya Kangik?" she asked. "Yes, but not in the center of town where the rich men live. Although Kapugan is also rich, he lives in a simple green house on the riverbank. It is upstream, beside the wilderness, where the people he loves feel free to visit." Trembling with eagerness, Mayax asked Uma to tell her more about Kapugan, and Uma, spilling over with enthusiasm, told him how the town and its people had grown poor and hungry several years ago. The walrus had all but vanished from the coast, the gray whales were rare, and the seals were few and far between. The Bureau of Indian Affairs put most everyone on pensions, and so they drank and forgot all they knew. Then Kapugan arrived. He was full of pride and held his head high. He went out into the wilderness and came back with musk oxen. These he bred and raised. The men helped him, the women made the fur into thread, and then into mittens and beautiful sweaters and scarves. These were sold to the Gusiks, who paid high prices for them, and within a few years the people of Kangik became independent and prosperous. "But there is still a need for caribou and wolverine furs for clothing and trim," she said, "so Kapugan and Atik go hunting every winter to supply the town." "Kapugan did not come this year?" she went on. "Kapugan did not come. He let me come instead," she smiled, slipping her baby into her cuss-book, tightened her belt, and stood. "Kapugan is wise and strong." Mayax turned her back to Uma. She must not see the quivering of her body at every mention of her father's name. He had been dead to her for so long that she was almost frightened by the knowledge that he lived. Yet she loved each cold chill that told her it was true. Outside, the dogs began fighting over their rations, and Atik's whip cracked like a gunshot. Mayak shivered at the sound. She thought of Amarok, and tears welled in her eyes, but did not fall, for she was also thinking about Kapugan. She must find him. She would save the wolves she must find him. He would save the wolves just as he had saved the people of Kangik. "Amarok, Amarok," she sang as she fluffed up her furs. Uma turned to her in surprise. "You are happy after all," she said in Eskimo. "I thought perhaps this was the beginning of your periods and that your family had sent you to a hut to be alone." I wasn't expecting that sentence. "Go get in the period hut." "You are happy after all," she said in Eskimo. "I thought perhaps this was this was the beginning of your period and that your family had sent you to a hut to be alone." "The old grandmother who raised me did that, and I was miserable and so unhappy because no one does that anymore." Mayak shook her head. "I am not yet a woman." Uma did not inquire further, but hugged her. Then she put her baby in the cuss-book and crept out the door to join Atik in the starlit darkness. It was day, and the constellations of the southern hemisphere were shining overhead. The dogs were biting their harnesses and fighting each other, and Atik was trying to make them hold still. Suddenly they lunged in all directions, and the sled was moving. Atik picked up Uma and the baby, put them on the sled, and calling his grateful thanks to Mayax, took off. She waved until they were lost. She waved until they were lost in the darkness, and then rushed into her own house. She rolled up her sleeping skins and loaded her sled. She hoisted her pack to her back and picked up Tornayet. Carefully, she slipped the feather coat around his breast, and leaving his wings free, she tied the little coat onto his back. He looked silly. She laughed and rubbed her nose against his beak and tucked him into the hood of her parka. Amna ya ya ayamna, she sang as she slid to the river, put on her snowshoes, and strode down to the snapping ice bed. She had gone about a mile when she heard Kapoo bark. She knew it was he. His voice was unmistakable. Terrified, she turned around. Stay! Stay! She screamed. The wind picked up her words and blew them down the river. Kapoo ran up to her, followed by Nails and the pups. All were yipping authoritatively as they told her to join them. I cannot, she cried. My own Amarok lives. I must go to him. She walked forward a few steps and turned and glared as the wolf leader had done. For a moment they hesitated, as if not believing her message. Then they dashed away and ran up the river. They called from the bank, and then they were gone. Maix had spoken her last words to her wolves. She thought of Kapoogan and hurried on. What would she say to him? Would they rub noses when they met? Surely he would hug his favorite child and let her enter his house, tan his hide, sew his clothes, cook his food. There was so much she could do for this great hunter now. Prepare caribou, catch rabbits, pluck birds, and even make tools with water and the freezing air. She would be very useful to him, and they would live as they were meant to live, with the cold and the birds and the beasts. She tried to recall Kapoogan's face, his dark eyes, and the brows that drooped kindly. Would his cheeks still be strong and creased by laughter? Would he still have long hair and stand tall? A green fountain of magnetic light shot up into the sky, its edges rimmed with sparks. The air crackled, the river groaned, and Mayax pointed her boots toward Kapoogan. That's her walking away, and then the wolves are walking away in the other direction. So she had to say goodbye to her wolves. Because she doesn't want them coming too close to the other people in the town. Especially during hunting season. Sent $500. No, you didn't. Okay, Mayax pointed her boots toward Kapoogan. She could see the village of Kangik long before she got to it. Its lights twinkled in the winter night on the first bench of the river near the sea. When she could make out windows and the dark outline of houses, she pulled her sled to the second bench above the river and stopped. She needed to think before meeting Kapoogan. She pitched her tent and spread out her sleeping skins. Lying on her stomach, she peered down on the town. It consisted of about 50 wooden houses. A few were large, but all had that same rectangular design with a peaked roof. Kangik was so snowy that she could not see if there was trash in the streets, but even if there had been, she would not have cared. Kapoogan's home had to be beautiful. The village had one crossroad where the church and mission stood. On either side of them were the stores which Mayax recognized by the many people who wandered in and out. She listened. Dog teams barked from both ends of town. And although she knew there were snowmobiles, the village was essentially a sled dog town, an old-fashioned Eskimo settlement. That pleased her. Her eyes roamed the streets. A few children were out romping in the snow, and she guessed that it was about 10 o'clock in the morning, the time Eskimo children were sent out to play. By that hour, their mothers had completed their morning chores and had time to dress the little ones and send them outside, cold as it was. Below the town, she could see the musk oxen Uma had spoken about. They were circled together near the gate of their enclosure, heads facing out to protect themselves from wolves and bears. Her heart thrilled to see these wondrous oxen of the north. She could help Capugan take care of the herd. Two children burst out of a house, two children burst out of a house, put a board across a barrel like a seesaw, and took their position, standing on either side of the board. They began jumping, sending each other higher and higher, and coming down on the board with incredible accuracy. My ex had seen this game in Barrow, and she watched the flying figures with fascination. Then she slowly lifted her eyes and concentrated on the houses. Yeah, wake up all. We only got a few more pages left. Literally. If y'all want to hear the end. It's kind of just wrapping up now. She's obviously on her way back home to try to find her dad, who she found out was alive by these two people who came into her camp. So she found out her dad might be alive in this town, that he just kind of kayaked into the sea and washed up this somewhere and settled. Because he was grieving his wife, he kind of just like never went back to where he was supposed to go. And then everyone thought he was dead. My ex had seen this game in Barrow, and she watched the flying figures with fascination. Then she slowly lifted her eyes and concentrated on the houses. There were two greenhouses near the wilderness. She was debating which one was Capugin's when the door opened in the smaller one and three children tumbled out. She decided he must live in the other one, with the windows, the annex, and two wooden boats in the yard. A woman came out of Capugin's house and hurried across the snow. Of course, my ex thought. He is married. He has someone to sew and cook for him. But I can still help with the oxen. The woman passed the church and stopped at the mission door. She was engulfed in light for an instant, and then the door closed behind her. My ex arose. It was time to seek out her father. He would be alone. Her feet skimmed the snow as she ran down the hill and across the road, where the children were hitching a dog to a sled. They giggled, and Tournette answered their high, bird-like voices from inside her hood. As my ex neared the dark greenhouse, she took Tournette in her hand and ran right up to the door. She knocked. Footsteps sounded from a far corner of the house. The door opened, and there stood Capugan. He was just as she remembered him, rugged, but with dark, gentle eyes. Not a word came to her mind, not even his name or a greeting. She was too moved by the sight of him to speak. Then Tournette peeped. She held him out. "I have a present for you," she said, at last in Eskimo. The feather coat rustled, and Tournette's amber head pulled into the covering like a turtle. "What is it?" Capugin's voice was resonant and warm, and seemed to come from the seashore at Nunavak, where the birds sang and the sea was framed with the fur of his parka. "Come in. I've never seen such a bird." He spoke English, and she smiled and shook her head. He repeated his invitation in Yupik. Mayak stepped across the threshold and into his home. The big room was warm and smelled of skins and fat. Harpoons hung on the wall, and under the window was a long couch of furs. The kayak hung from the ceiling, and a little stove glowed in the center of the room. Capugin's house in Kangik looked just like Capugin's house in Seal Camp. She was home. Tournette hopped to the floor, his feather coat blooming behind him like a courting parmesan. He ran under a fir. "He wears a coat," Capugan laughed, and got down on his knees to peer at the bird. "Yes," Mayak said. "He is the spirit of the birds. He is a golden plover." "A golden plover, the spirit of the birds. Where did you hear that?" Capugan arose and pushed back her parka hood. "Who are you?" "Julie Edwards, Mayak's Capugan." The great frost-blackened hands ran softly over her face. "Lee," he whispered. "Yes, you are she. You are beautiful like your mother." He opened his arms. She ran into them, and for a long time he held her tightly. "When they sent you to school," he said softly, "Nunavak was too much to bear." I left. Hold on. Oh, hold on. When they sent you to school, he said softly, Nunavak was too much to bear. I left and began a new life. Last year, when at last I was rich, I went back to get you, and you were gone. His fingers touched her hair, and he hugged her once more. The door opened, and the woman came in. Who have we here? She asked in English. Mayak saw that her face was pale and her hair was reddish gold. A chill spread over her. What had Capoogin done? What had happened to him that he would marry a Gusak? What was his new life? Capoogin and his woman talked. She loudly, Capoogin quietly. Max's eyes went around the room again. This time she saw not just the furs and the kayak, but electric lamps, a radio phonograph, cotton curtains, and through the door to the annex, the edge of an electric stove, a coffee pot, and china dishes. There were bookshelves and a framed picture on the wall of some American country garden. Then she saw a helmet and goggles on a chair. Mayak stared at them until Capoogin noticed her. Ah, that, he said. I now own an airplane, Mayax. It's the only way to hunt today. The seals are scarce and the whales are almost gone, but sportsmen can still hunt from planes. Mayax heard no more. It could not be. It could not be. She would not let it be. She instantly buried what she was thinking in the shadows of her mind. Mayax, the wife said in bad Upik, I teach in the school here. We shall enroll you tomorrow. You can learn to read and write English. It's very difficult to live in this Eskimo town without knowing English. Mayax looked at Capoogin. I am on my way to San Francisco, she said softly in Upik. The Gussicks and Wainwright have arranged transportation for me. I shall go tomorrow. A telephone rang. Capoogin answered it and jotted down a note. I'll be right back, he said to Mayax. I'll be right back. Then we'll talk. He hugged her. Mayax stiffened and looked at the helmet. Ellen, fix her some food, he called as he put on his coat. A long American-made Arctic field jacket. He zipped it with a flourish and went out the door. Ellen went into the kitchen and Mayax was alone. Slowly she picked up Tornayet, put on her sealskin parka, and placed the little bird in her hood. Then she snapped on the radio, and as it crackled, whined, and picked up the music, she opened the door and softly closed it behind her. Capoogin, after all, was dead to her. Jeez. It's rough. On the second bench of the river above the town, she found her tent and pack, threw them onto her sled, and bending forward, hauled on it. She hauled on it. She walked on up the river towards her house. She was an Eskimo, and as an Eskimo she must live. The hour of the lemming was upon the land, cycling slowly towards the hour of Mayax. She would build snow houses in winter, a sod house in summer. She would carve and sew and trap, and someday there would be a boy like herself. They would raise children who would live with the rhythm of the beasts in the land. The seals are scarce and the whales are almost gone, she heard Capoogin say. When are you coming to live with us in San Francisco? Called Amy. It's like the two voices kind of battling in her head. One is saying on her shoulder, she's got Capoogin on her shoulder going, the seals are scarce and the whales are almost gone. And then she's got Amy on this shoulder going, when are you coming to live with us in San Francisco? So she's kind of debating where to go. Mayax walked backward, watching the river valley. My nose is getting stuffy again. Mayax walked backwards, watching the river valley. When the last light of Kangik disappeared, the stars lit the snow and the cold deepened far below zero. The ice thundered and boomed, roaring like drum beats across the Arctic. Tornayet peeped. Mayax turned her head, touched him with her chin, and felt his limpness. She stopped walking and lifted him into the cold. Tornayet, what is wrong with you? Are you sick? Swiftly opening her pack, she took out some meat, chewed it to thaw it, and gave it to the bird. Oh, he refused to eat. She put him inside her parka and pitched her tent out of the wind. When she had banked it with snow, she lit a small fire. The tent glowed, then warmed. Tourneille lay in her hands, his head on her fingers. He peeped softly and closed his eyes. Many hours later, she buried him in the snow. The totem of Amarok was in her pocket. Her fingers ran over it, but she did not take it out. She sang to the spirit of Amarok in her best English. The seals are scarce and the whales are almost gone. The spirits of the animals are passing away. Amarok, Amarok, you are my adopted father. My feet dance because of you. My eyes see because of you. My mind thinks because of you. And it thinks on this thundering night that the hour of the wolf and the Eskimo is over. Julie pointed her boots towards Kapugin. So she went back home. I think part of the reason she left is she noticed his goggles and his coat were, I believe, like the same thing that the hunters were wearing. Remember it said like, oh, the hunters were flying so low she could see their coats and goggles. So she thinks her dad was one of the hunters that possibly shot Amarok. She goes, then she saw a helmet and goggles on the chair. She stared at them until Kapugin noticed her. Ooh, hold on. And then he says, I now own an airplane. It's the only way to hunt today. The seals are scarce and the whales are gone, but sportsmen can still hunt from planes. Mayax heard no more. It could not be. It could not be. She would not let it be. She instantly buried what she was thinking in the shadows of her mind. So she's thinking that her dad is the one that shot her wolf. And then she grabbed his jacket. She said he called us. He put on his coat, a long American-made Arctic field jacket. He zipped it with a flourish and went out the door. And that was the same type of jacket that the guys in the thing were wearing. So she goes back to her little camp, and then her little birdie passes away, and she just doesn't want to be alone anymore, so she goes home to her daddy. So that's the last word right there, is just Julie pointed her boots towards Kapugin. So she kind of starts to leave again. She's like, oh, I'm going to go to San Francisco because I don't like what you're doing. And then her birdie passes, and she's like, actually, I think I want to go home. But you do get to find out what happens when she gets home, though, because there's a second book. So it does kind of leave off on like you don't really know exactly what's going to happen, especially where it left it with like her dad possibly being the hunter who shot Amarok. Country says, great book, Ari. Thank you. I'm glad you guys like it. Yeah, so we'll have to start 2 next time to find out what happens when she goes home. This is the sequel to the Newbery Award winning Julie of the Wolves. And this one's just called Julie. It's a little longer than the first one. Ooh. I think this one's a little longer. Not too much longer, but it's taller. I think the thicknesses are similar, but it's taller, and I think this one's a little thicker. Not too much, but a little bit. Yeah, it's like maybe a third-ish thicker. I'm gonna do it this way. It's a little bit thicker. A little bit thicker. So yeah, next time I guess we'll get to find out what happens when she goes home, because I did forget a lot. So but yeah, that was what that was implying at the end, in case you guys missed that. It's kind of implying that her dad was possibly the hunter that was in the plane. There was 2 hunters there, and they kind of implied that one of them might have been her dad. I'm gonna put my ice pack back in the fridge. But yeah, it's getting late now, so I'm gonna go relax, and my nose is getting too stuffy to talk. It was pretty good actually tonight, though, for most of the story. It's like the more I talk, the more it just starts getting like icky. And plus it gets late as it I don't know, at night my nose gets stuffy. Once I sit down and stop moving everything, it's icky in there. What you doing, Looney? Get a tissue. Oh. Yep, hi honey. Ann Willever says, hi, is the book done? Yep, we just finished. Yeah, we're gonna go chill. I'm gonna go eat my dinner and relax. So yeah, I hope everyone has a good night. We'll see you all tomorrow. Hopefully my shoulder feels a little better tomorrow. And we'll have Duke tomorrow night, so maybe I could pop in tomorrow night after and let you guys say hi to Duke. Good night, everybody. Sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite. And dream of sweet wolves. Bye. Sweet howling wolves. Ow! Looney just went to get... I'd show you Looney. I usually like to show you Looney after, but she went to go get goodies from Grammy. Looney went for goodies from Grammy, so she's over there. Night, everybody. Bye-bye. Where's Stratty? Let me show you Stratty. Is he here? Well, Stratty's here. You can say goodnight to Stratty. Stratty, one of the animals has to say goodnight to you. Hi. Hi, sweet boy. Were you listening to story time? You've been listening to story time from over here these days. Usually you sit on the couch and listen to my story time. Yeah, usually Stratty sits with me when I'm reading. It puts him to sleep too. Okay. Good night, sweet boy. Good night. Don't you ever bite me again. That was mean. I was bragging about how nice you are. Then you bit me. All right. Good night, sweet kitty. Purring. Sweet kitty. Bye.